The future of the village president of Shorewood Hills is up in the air tonight. That's after a resident and village board trustee filed a complaint to remove John Imes from office for gross neglect of duty. WMTV's Sam Swartz was at the special board of trustees meeting tonight and joins us live in studio on what village leaders decided. Sam.
Hey, Mackenzie, the complaint lists three main reasons why village president John Imes should be removed. Number one, they say he lied about money. Number two, he failed to disclose conflicts of interest. And number three, he concealed public records. Imes denies all of those allegations and calls them vague, baseless, and unsupported.
Which charges that village president John Imes has engaged in gross neglect of duty.
Shorewood Hills Village President John Imes says disagreements in day-to-day operations are being framed as misconduct.
Removal of an elected official under Wisconsin law, that requires verified evidence and a high legal standard. And, that standard has not been met.
Trustee Brian Utchig says Imes has been dishonest and hasn't acted transparently.
The question is whether the evidence, taken as a whole, more likely than not, establishes conduct constituting cause for removal.
In an 8-page complaint, Utchig and another resident says Imes misrepresented financial figures about this building leaders were considering buying as a new village hall.
There was extensive public scrutiny, there was financial review, there was debate, and the village ultimately decided not to proceed.
The complaint also said Imes should have recused himself on certain votes because of his connections and used private emails for village business.
I've never used my position for personal financial gain. I've never concealed or destroyed records. I never intentionally misled the board or the public.
If John has adequate answers to the charges today, I will not vote to remove him.
However, Imes' attorney doesn't believe he's being charged under the right statute.
The complaint doesn't allege President Imes has abandoned his post, only that they don't like the manner in which they filled it.
As trustees, we each took an oath to act in the best interest of the village and to carry out our duties fairly, carefully, independently. That obligation applies equally here.
And that special meeting is still going on. It has been for the last 4 hours. Both sides just wrapped up giving their arguments. We'll have more information on the results of the board's vote on our website and on our mobile app. Reporting in studio, Sam Swartz, WMTV 15 News.
All right, Sam, thank you. John Imes has been president since 2023 and has been on the village board since 2012. Trustee Utchig was elected in last April's election.